Hallelujah. We glorify God. We magnify God. God bless you. You may be seated. Thank you, Missionary Loeso, amen, for that prayer and setting the atmosphere. God bless you. DBQ, I need your help here. So tonight, everybody say tonight, this is going to be interactive. We're not going to have a lot of formality. Can you give everybody a copy, please? We're not going to have a lot of formality. I want it to be interactive. And I want you to stop and ask questions. Please ask questions. Deacon Collins, can you help? Ask questions. And some of this is for Joy of Life members, and God bless some of the visitors that are here. God bless you. For district missionaries here, God bless her. She's hiding behind the mask. We're good to see her. But for some of you who were here a year ago, we did a series of workshops and hitting topics that were of interest and of importance. And it was just, and we stopped that when we went through the list of workshops. But the Lord laid on my heart that with so much going on and people have concerns about what's going on, and it would be good to just do a little bit of that here tonight. And so I do not profess to be an expert, but I do profess that God has blessed me to walk in circles to know a few things. And so we want to hear your questions, and I'll be the first one to say I don't know, but we'll find the answer, and or we'll say we'll direct you to the thing that you need to be directed. I have some slides, so hopefully you can see the slides, but we also have handouts, so we have the slides for those that are on live stream. And so, can I go backwards here? All right, so I call this family financial planning. I could have titled it anything, but I titled it Family Financial Planning. So what I want to do tonight is I want to talk about 5 topics, maybe 6. I might take a couple of detours here. But I want to talk about what's going on in some of the market today. And we all know inflation is high, the price of everything is up, eggs, et cetera. And as a result of that, there's a bunch of interest rate increases. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve. I did have the opportunity to be a board member of the Federal Reserve, but I want to talk a little bit about who they are, what they do, and a little bit of what's going on and a historical context of how we got to where we are. I want to talk about the stock market volatility. Some of us have individual investment accounts. Others, you may not have an individual investment account, but you have a 401k account that you're concerned about. Others, you may not know it, but if you work for a company and you have a pension, your pension has investments, and the stock market volatility affects the value of your pension. And then others, I know Sister Gwen Murray is here, and I know Deacon Collins is here. They worked for the railroad, and the railroad retirement fund is actually invested in the stock market too. You may not know that, but the railroad retirement fund, and so that does impact you. I want to talk a little bit about bank liquidity and some of the pressures, and we have Sister Carnetta here, who worked with First National, and she can certainly weigh in as we talk about that. But we'll talk about tax season, and then one of my favorite topics that nobody likes to ever talk about, because y'all are scared to talk about it, but it's actually one of my favorite topics. And the reason why it is not only because of the near-death experience I went through and the things I realized as I was literally trying to have conversations with my dear wife from my hospital bed and trying to communicate things that I felt important that she should know as I was preparing to die. They didn't want to hear it, but I was preparing to die, and I was communicating things, and that was a tough environment to try and do that. Sitting in a hospital bed, tell her, give me my laptop, and I'm trying to communicate and transfer things. And then I had I'll call it the honor of my good friend, one of my best friends, Mother Gardner's brother, Brother Larry Chandler. He had appointed me executor. I was too sick to do that, but I did work with the family through that process. And the things learned through that process, I think, are very important for us to know and share as part of what I call end-of-life planning. So those are the things I want to talk about today, and I'm going to go through them. So I thought I would start with the Federal Reserve. Some of you may know who the Federal Reserve is. I know you hear about them in the news, but just a couple of quick slides, and we'll run through this quick, just to explain, hopefully in common language, who they are. So the Federal Reserve Bank is the central bank of the United States. Most Western or modern countries with modern economies have a central reserve bank. And what the Central Reserve Bank does, those primary functions, they set monetary policy, which is what most of what I'm going to talk about here, where they really have a twofold goal. Their goal is to maximize employment or minimize unemployment. You know, historically, they've had a goal of or minimize unemployment. They've tried to keep below 3-4% unemployment, and they also have a goal of stable prices. That means minimize inflation. So historically, their goal was to keep inflation below 2.5%. So that is their statutory goal. They also have a regulation goal where they supervise all the banks, whether it's a federal bank, state bank, et cetera. And then they also help run the financial market. So they actually process when we're making payments, when you're writing a check, and that check is clearing one bank and going into another bank, there's a payments processing system behind the scenes, and they're actually managing that payments processing system for the entire country. So the Federal Reserve, it's an independent bank. So there are governors, there are 7 board of governors. They're appointed by the president, okay? Their authority is given by Congress, legislative authority. The chair is appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, that is the vice chair and the other board of governors. But they are independent, okay? They are independent. You sometimes see presidents yelling at the Federal Reserve. President Trump took a shot at Jerome Powell back in, I think it was about 2017, 2018, when he started reversing quantitative easing. I'm going to talk about that. And the stock market went down, and Trump basically said he was a criminal, and unfortunately, Chairman Powell retreated, which has some implications for what you're seeing today. I'll get into that. But they're supposed to be independent, setting monetary policy, okay? So there's a board of governors. There are 12 reserve banks around the country. You could see on the map, if you could see the reserve banks, the New York Fed is typically the big historic one. I was a member of the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank. Had a dynamic leader named Esther George. She just retired in January of this year. Amazing, amazing leader. The Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank, over the last 10 years, a lot of people don't know, but they've actually accumulated responsibility from the other Federal Reserve banks, and they've grown rapidly. So Right now, here today, the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank actually is the Federal Reserve Bank that is the primary, y'all can make more copies if you need to, it's the primary, what they call payments processor for the country. And as part of that, what we don't know, but it's public, so I'm not sharing anything confidential, is the Omaha branch of the Federal Reserve Bank down on Farnham and 22nd or Farnham and 20th, somewhere around there, that whole compound down there, they now are the place, the only place in the world that processes the payments for most of our deployed military men and women around the world. So they have a whole system and process where naturally, if military men and women are around the world, you can't be shipping pallets of cash to them. So they have a whole process that's somewhat like a debit card, like an ATM card, but it's not exactly like that. But that's how they get paid, and that's how they spend money. Sailors on aircraft carriers, airmen, Army personnel, Marines, and bases around the world, even special forces people when they're in remote places that they can't tell you about. They have downlinks where they get paid or they can have access to money through this process that is run right here in Omaha out of the local compound. So the Federal Reserve primary goal is to set fiscal or set monetary policy. So any questions, and I'm going to start going into really what has happened and how we have gotten here. Any questions on that background? No? Okay. So what happened? How did we get here? So we got to go back to the 2007, 2008 global financial crisis and the market crash. Do y'all remember that? There was a market crash, a housing crash, Lehman Brothers disappeared. There was massive uncertainty about the global financial system. We actually came pretty close to a financial meltdown in the world and in the global financial system. We came scarily close to it. And what happened? So leading up to that, so if you go back, I think it was 1999, Congress repealed something called the Glass-Steagall Act, which had been in place since the Depression. And that act basically prevented banks from crossing over between commercial lending and different types of trading, particularly trading in complex things like derivatives. So that was abolished, I believe it was 1999. And that was abolished, and there started to be a lot of crazy lending practices that were based on what they called mortgage-backed securities linked to derivatives, linked tenuously to real estate. So if you remember, people were buying homes with no money down, and they were flipping them and buying something else with no money down. People were buying $500,000 homes with no income, and there was all kinds of madness. So there were all of these risky processes that were going on. There was a massive housing burst. If you remember, housing prices were skyrocketing, and when this all came, Lehman Brothers collapsed, and things, when it became a reality that there was nothing behind that. If you have a bunch of people buying houses and they have no income to pay for the mortgage, and all of these banks are lending all this money to these people who are buying these higher and higher prices of homes, there's nothing there to pay for it. There's nothing there behind it. And so the market was really on verge of crashing in a world recession. And we, in this country, along with we leading, but also all of the banks around the world. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it has an impact to what's going on today. That's why I'm giving you this background. So we basically put interest rates at zero, which had never happened before. And we did some other things where really for the first time in history, and if you talk to Fed people and if they are honest, there's actually a frontline thing that was done recently that gets most of the facts right, even though Frontline always has a spin, they get most of the facts right. We were doing things in the Fed that had never been done before in history. We started buying bonds, and they started doing something called quantitative easing, where they basically loaded up the Fed's balance sheet to historically high numbers because they were injecting liquidity into the market. They were basically saying the financial market is about to seize because of all the stuff that has happened, and just massive billions and trillions of dollars they injected into the market to help keep the economy going. That was probably all that they could have done, and thank goodness it worked. But the issue is they could only do monetary policy. They can't do fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is Congress and the president. Congress and the president have to determine tax and spending policies that help drive growth and do productive things. The Fed can only do monetary policy. So the Fed was injecting massive amounts of cash into the economy to get the economy going, and the people receiving that cash, which were large banks, some large corporations, or a lot of large corporations was doing loans. They were not doing anything productive with that cash. They were taking that cash and investing back in the same bonds that the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, was putting out, because they're like, I'm going to put my money here and make it safe. So it wasn't really helping the economy. It was just putting cash to keep the financial system going. And the corporations that got that cash, my corporation was one, they were flush with cash, so they started doing something called stock buybacks, right? So stock buyback is when a corporation buys their open stock on the stock market and reduces the amount of stock they have outstanding. So therefore, their stock price goes up because, and if I'm trying to make this simple, but if a corporation has 1,000 shares of stock worth $1,000 and the corporation is worth $1,000, 1,000 shares worth $1 a piece, and they buy back 100 of those shares, and they only have 900 shares out there, then those 900 shares are now worth $1.10, not $1, simply because they bought it back. So they were using this massive cash from the Federal Reserve to buy back stock, and it really wasn't creating jobs or anything else. So what happened? Those zero interest rates and that massive amount of liquidity started inflating asset values. And by inflating asset values, it inflated the price of stock in the stock market. If you look at what stock market prices went, they went way up. It inflated the value of homes, because we all know that if interest rates are 5%, you can only afford a certain amount of home on a certain income. You'll understand that, right? If interest rates are 0%, you can afford a more expensive home, right? You'll understand that, right? Because the same dollar goes longer, your monthly payment is low. So zero interest rates cause housing prices to go up, cause the stock market to grow up. It caused inflated asset values of everything. Car prices, everything became inflated because of zero interest rates and the liquidity that was injected into the market. So my second bullet point is companies, they were doing a bunch of financial transactions instead of productive. So they had all this cash, and instead of investing it in things that would create jobs, create productive things, they were buying back stock to increase their stock price. So company I worked for, I had stock, Deacon Collins, and every year they bought back stock, which increased the stock price, which increased my wealth, and I did nothing. But they bought back. And so this was all driving, and we all were happy because y'all saw stock prices go up, y'all saw home prices go up, so you're all happy and excited because you said, hey, but it really was driven by this liquidity that the Federal Reserve put in the system. You know, the Republicans took credit for it, the Democrats took credit for it, everybody took credit for it. It was driven a lot by the liquidity that the Federal Reserve put in the system as a response to the 2007-2008. Now, again, Trump was elected president in 2016. So it was there. When did the pandemic start? Like 20? Huh? 2020, right? So sometime around 2017 or so, the Federal Reserve, and I was on the Federal Reserve Board in Kansas City, every meeting, because we met monthly, every meeting, we all would give our vote. Our vote doesn't count because the Board of Governors and what they call the Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, they vote. They're the ones that decide. But every meeting, that's Elder Belton. I just saw a picture of you and Caracos on Facebook. Good to see you back. But every meeting, we would vote, raise interest rates, reduce quantitative easing, reduce the liquidity in the market, because we're all business people, and we could see what's happening, we could see what's coming. Dr. Bonnie Perry Adams, every single meeting, we would vote that. But our vote doesn't count. We're just an advisory vote, and it never happened. I think, again, it was 2017, Chairman Powell tried to start reducing the quantitative easing, and the stock market, because they know that the stock values were inflated because of this. Somebody said, I don't use these words, somebody said they had a hissy fit, and there was a stock market crash. I don't know if you remember, there was like a huge crash. I can't remember the date, what it was. And then our then President Trump threw a fit, and Chairman Powell backed away from it, and that he didn't do what we really should have done back then. So fast forward to 2020, the pandemic starts, and then it's really bad because the world shuts down, things close down, airlines shut down, hotels, restaurants, companies close, people are out of work, and so of necessity, the government doubled downs in 2020 and puts even more liquidity in the marketplace to keep it going. If y'all remember, the pandemic was, we were shutting down the whole place, so they put more liquidity. They gave every person lots of money, at least $2,400. Some of y'all got more than that. I didn't get anything, I let the record show, but they gave every person money. Y'all looking at me like I'm talking foreign language. Y'all know what happened. Y'all got a free check for nothing. They did it of necessity, right? So this Fed process of easy money, zero interest rates, a lot of liquidity continued because of the pandemic. And we could all argue it was a necessity given what the pandemic did, but it exacerbated what was happening. And like the old folks used to say, sooner or later you gotta pay the piper, right? It doesn't last forever. So all of those things created inflation, all right? Every economist in the world, every person at the Fed, every knowledgeable politician who wanted to be honest, every business person who wanted to be honest and kind of really understood that inflation was going to come from what had happened. And today, you will hear people say we should have tapered back monetary policy sooner, but we didn't. So what happened? Inflation started, and it took off like a rocket. Y'all know what happened. Part of it was fueled with Russia and Ukraine, but the price of everything just skyrocketed. And so the Fed, of necessity, had to do this drastic reduction in liquidity, raising interest rates, changing the balance sheet, reversing the quantitative easing, and this massive month after month after month to put the brakes on inflation. Because again, their goal is no more than 2.5%, and we were like 8, 9, going to Jimmy Carter, a level 16% inflation. Some of y'all are old enough, y'all remember that. So they put the brakes on the economy. So when they're raising interest rates, what happens? That reduces asset values, all right? The stock market is going to go down because inflation went up. It reduces asset value. It's more expensive to borrow and to spend. It causes an economic slowdown. It causes unemployment. And so here's the thing. The Fed and I'm giving you this background. Now I'm going to get to the point here. The Fed has this dual thing of fiscal policy to keep inflation down, but also maximize employment. And so what the Fed has been looking at, I'm not on the Fed anymore, but I can tell you what they're looking at. They're looking at the fact inflation's still high and unemployment's still low, so they're continuing to raise interest rates. And because they're continuing to raise interest rates, and the stock market knows when they do that, it's going to reduce asset values, the stock market is continuing to go down because they're raising interest rates because unemployment is still low, but inflation is still high. And they're going to continue to do that until inflation gets under control and goes back towards that 2.5% monetary policy goal that they have. I want to stop there and make sure, are y'all tracking me? I can't tell if y'all are tracking me. No, yes. Yes, no. I don't want to lose you. I want you to understand this because it's important to the next point. Yes, no? Y'all tracking? All right. Yes.
So when you're saying liquidity, it says the more money without obligation that's in our pocket, meaning we don't owe it to anybody, we don't owe to pay any interest on, that is a trigger to inflation if it doesn't get deterred?
No, so the liquidity that I'm talking about is the Federal Reserve putting extra cash in the economy. And by the Federal Reserve putting extra cash in the economy, people are spending that on stuff that they otherwise wouldn't spend it on. And so since they're spending it on stuff they wouldn't otherwise spend it on, and the supply capacity to keep up with it can't keep up with the demand that their people are buying stuff because you have this extra liquidity, then prices go up. When you have more demand than you have supply, the prices go up. And so all this cash that's out there and people are spending money on stuff that makes no sense, then the demand goes up and the inflation goes up. And that really is a core part of what has happened with these bank failures, which I'm going to get into next. So does that make sense? No? No? Okay. So it's more money in the economy that's causing money to be spread out and prices go up, that causes inflation. So there is a true value of anything, okay? So everything has a true value, right? Somebody said the value is whatever somebody's willing to pay for it, and that's true. The value of something is what somebody's willing to pay for. people telling me about red bottom shoes. I didn't know about those, but they said it's $1,000. I'm like, okay, I guess that's worth that, whatever there are. But there is a true value to something. So the true value to something, like a business, the true value to a business is the amount of profit you earn in that business. And they do something where they discount it, or they say, I'm simplifying this, it's like, how much money is that business going to make in the next 10 years? That's called a multiple of 10. And then I'm willing to pay that for that business. So Deacon Corte, if you have a business that makes $50,000 a year and you want to sell it to me, I might say, if I'm using a multiple or an estimate of 10 or 8, I might say, okay, if that's going to make $50,000 for the next 8 years, I might be willing to pay you $450,000 for it, because that's a value for your business. What was happening is, with all this extra money, I'm like, I'll give you $700,000 for it. And that was not the true value, which was causing inflated asset values and inflation. So I have on this chart here something called PE. That means price earnings. So every business has a price earnings ratio. And what that simply means is, what's the price of it divided by the earnings that they have. So if you want to buy a stock or something in a business, the PE is the price of that stock divided by the earnings in that business. That's called a PE ratio, a price earnings ratio. With all of the liquidity in the stock market, a lot of the stocks you guys like, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Tesla, all those stocks that you guys like because you like the name and everybody's talking about it, they had price earning ratios like 40, 80, 100, 200, 400. I'm an old retired guy, Dr. Bonnie Perry Adams, so I have a limit on what I buy to a price earnings ratio of 10, maybe 12, but I don't buy, because if you're buying a Tesla that had, I think 400, it had a 400 price earnings ratio, but you said Tesla stock, I'm gonna buy Tesla stock. You're basically saying, I'm paying 400 times the amount of earnings I can get in 1 year. So I wish that you prosper and have a long life, but I don't think you're gonna live 400 years. All right? So people are buying it on the expectation that they're going to increase earnings in the future, so that 400 becomes something more normal, like 20 or 17. That's what they're hoping for. But the true value of any stock, the historical value is, call it that 20 price earnings, 17 price earnings. So with the interest rate increases by the Federal Reserve, all of these dynamics going on, those stock values that were way high, unbelievably high, are now cratering. So those of you that had stock in all of those companies and you're crying the blues and you're like, woe is me, when you get home, look at your price earnings ratio. If it's still, this is me. I'm just gonna say, if it's still above 25, 30, you got more crying to do. Because there's a true value. And that true value is the price you're paying for the earnings. The other part of the true value is the cash flow of that company, and so a company has to have cash flow. So I'm gonna stop there, and then I'm gonna start talking about the bank issue. And you're tracking? I'm getting blank stares. I can't tell if y'all are tracking or not. Sister Deanne, you tracking? Sister Daphne, you tracking? Because you're looking at me like I'm speaking Greek. Mother Weddles, Mother Weddles, you tracking? All right. So, with all of that, we have what's been in the news lately called the Silicon Valley Bank. It's also been in the news, Credit Suisse Bank, which is a European bank. There have been also a couple other banks in the news called First Republic Bank. So I want to talk about Silicon Valley because that's been in the news, and it's kind of the epitome of all of what I just told you about what's been happening with the Fed, liquidity, and the risk, and the crazy market. It's kind of like the epitome of that. So Silicon Valley Bank was actually only founded in 1983. It's a California bank. They were basically the banker to all the venture capitalists. 50% of the venture capitalists and kind of the technology innovation people in the country, they were the banker to them. So what happened was they took in all of this venture capital money, and then they put it in these investments that were not very liquid. All right, let me take a step back and talk a little bit about banks, and Sister Carnetta knows this very well. So banks take in deposits, right? And they pay you as little as they can on the deposit that they take in. Then they lend that money out, or they invest that money out, like in mortgages, car loans, business loans, et cetera, at a much higher rate. And their profit or their earnings is the difference between what they take in and they pay you and what they get from lending out. That's how banks make money. That's their profit. So the Silicon Valley Bank took in all of this money, and they had a lot of cash, and so they put it in these investments, and then these, I'll call them investments and loans that were very illiquid. You know what illiquid means? That means you can't really sell it fast. So a bank that has a 30-year mortgage with Elder Oaks, we can't just tell you to pay that 30-year mortgage back tomorrow because you're going to say, no, you got 30 years to pay it. So it's not very liquid. So banks are required to kind of have a portfolio where they keep enough cash or capital on hand to fund the transactions when people come to get their money. You want to get cash, you want to cash a paycheck or whatever. Silicon Valley Bank didn't do that. They took in all this cash, a lot of cash, and they put it in things that they really couldn't get their cash out fast enough. They put it in long-term bonds and things like that, longer than what they really should have, but they were trying to get it just like another small margin of a % of profit, so they put it in these long-term things they couldn't get their money out of. Silicon Valley Bank had something like 94% of its deposits and depositors were uninsured. That means the Federal Deposit Insurance Company insures up to $250,000. So if you have a bank account up to $250,000, that's what they insure up to that. 94% of their depositors were above $250,000. So a bunch of rich venture capitalists had money in there. So as interest, and I have a chart here. Sister Cornetta, I don't have First National Bank on the chart, and it's kind of hard to see this chart. But this chart shows the % of uninsured deposits by bank. That means the % of the deposits of that bank that are over $250,000 and are uninsured against the % of kind of long-term things they have. So if you look at Silicon Valley Bank, which is the second bank on that, they had like almost 94% uninsured, and they had like 94% in long-term things. So the problem is, as interest rates go up, were you stretching or you had a question? So as interest rates go up, yes. So there are a lot of regulations out there, and they actually were abiding by the regulations they had to abide by, and they were probably on the watch list of the regulators, but they were abiding by the regulations that they needed to buy. But what happened was when interest rates started going up, those long-term investments that they have, the value of those investments started going down. So here's a really crazy thing nobody will say. The value of their investments started going down. And so those 94% of rich venture capitalists, they saw all of that happening, and they know how this thing works. And they're like, hey, my money's at risk. So they did a run on the bank. So that's what's happened. They did a run on the bank because they saw interest rates going up, the value of Silicon Valley Bank's investments going down. There was a run on the bank, so they had to cash those investments in early at lower prices than what they would have because interest rates went up, asset values went down. And, you know, if everybody comes, First National Bank, I have a lot of money at First National Bank, but if everybody went to First National Bank tomorrow, First National Bank would be in trouble. You can't, no bank can sustain that. So they got themselves in the thing with a, can I say that I'm on live stream, so I got to be careful what I say, but with a bunch of rich people that understand this, saw what was happening, and they did a run on the bank. And so the bank went bankrupt. It happened so quickly, and there's actually some articles about it. It happened so quickly, the bank probably could have been saved had it not been happened so quickly, but all these venture capitalists started going on all these chat rooms and all of these postings and all of these things, and they're like, hey, get your money out. So it was like in 24 hours, poof, they were gone. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we need to understand kind of the reality of the value, the real value behind what we have, and not just caught up in things that happen, because values that you see in the marketplace can really be generated just by inflated things by monetary policy. All right, y'all got that? Because I'm gonna go to the next place. So, and I also said that because I don't want us to get worried about the banking system. Yes. So, so every bank, every credit union, every federal bank, every state bank, every credit union, they have regulators that regulate what they do. And every bank has, in a different posture financially, and good banks will understand when they're getting out on an edge, and they'll take actions to adjust that, either by adjusting their capital reserves or doing some other things. So I'll tell you a story. Co-Pastor Butler always says I tell too much TMI, too much personal information, but you know, Union Pacific has a credit union, Streamliner Federal Credit Union. And HAD had a substantial amount of money in the Streamliner Credit Union. And Mother Gwen Murray, Deacon Collins, I got a note from them, told me to take my money out of the credit union. I showed it to co-pastor, I said, I've never seen anything like this before. But they didn't want to be at risk with the amount of money I had in the credit union. So they told me, please take my money out of the credit union and put it somewhere else. They didn't have to ask me twice. I'm like, if you're gonna send me a letter like that, I'm gonna move. So that information about the health of banks is out there. You can find it. You just have to understand the reports, but that information, like that one chart that I put in here that you really can't read, You could find all kinds of health statistics about banks and get a good. But the good news is, if you're under $250,000 in deposits, you're protected by the FDIC. So I know the Rich Watson family has probably way more than that, but if you're under 250,000, you're protected. So I wanted to explain what was going on in the banks, but I want to go to my next topic. Any question on stock? Yes, Mother. Mike's on, Deacon Collins.
When you say the bank took the run on the money, do you mean those investors that had more than $250,000?
Yes.
Took their funds out of the bank?
Yes, they did a run on the bank.
And they were privy to it, and the president of the Silicon Valley, didn't he do the same thing? Didn't he remove all
There
of
are
his
reports that some of the executives sold some stock a couple of weeks in advance. There are reports of that. You know, obviously, I don't know if those are true or not, but they did a run on the bank. So here's a really bad thing, and I'm on live stream, so I got to be careful what I say, because I don't want to sound like I'm making a political statement. But if you recall, I think a couple of days after that happened, our government came out and said they were going to protect all depositors of the Silicon Valley Bank. And a bunch of y'all were like, oh, isn't that good? Isn't that nice? And I'm like, no, don't do it. Those are rich venture capitalists using play money to do play things. I was going to read. Let me read something. I picked this out. I read this. It said, for over a decade, low interest rates have allowed venture capitalists to accumulate huge funds to give increasingly unprofitable firms with unrealistic business models increasingly large valuations. There was an analysis in 2021 that showed 90% of these venture capital startups that were valued over $1 billion, 90% of them valued over $1 billion. That means you're buying stock in them, and the value's over 90% of them were unprofitable. 90% were unprofitable, and most would remain so. And they make a sarcastic comment here. The person that's writing this, he said, give me tens of billions of dollars and $120 billion stock market valuation, and someday, somehow, I will replace every taxi driver with gig workers paying them sub-minimum wages, or robot taxi with no wages while charging exorbitant fares for rides and adding to traffic. If not, I'll sell all my science fiction projects I've promised but didn't make a profit on. They're being sarcastic, but the point is, they had all of this money, fake money, doing nothing productive with it. I am sounding like a politician. And they did a run on the bank, which caused their bank to collapse. And because they cried, we said, oh, we're going to give all your money back. That's bad. Bad politics, bad policy. The reason why I went through all that is because I wanted y'all to understand kind of how all of this works. And I wanted you not to be worried when you read in the news about the bank, this bank is going under, that bank is going under. Yeah, they went under because they did some bad, stupid stuff, and the people in it did some things. All right, let me go to, I'm running out of time here. So I want to go to end of life plan. I'm just going to do tax planning really quick. So this is tax season. Everybody, you need to report all income. You should know your deductions are really limited. Your best deduction, one of the reasons I want to say this, your best deduction is charitable giving. Your best deduction is charitable giving. Property tax deductions are limited. Other deductions, medical deductions are limited. Your best deduction is charitable deductions. Charitable deductions are unlimited. When they get to, I think it's 50% of your income, then they start tapering them off. But I'm guessing none of y'all have given 50% of your income to charity. If you have, raise your hand. I want to ask you to donate to Joy of Life. But other than that, it's 100% deductible, 100% deductible. It is the best deduction you could have. Yes, Mother Weddles. Right.
Why do we have, thank you, why do we have some accountants, maybe, I don't know who the accountants are, but they're telling people your church donations do not count?
Absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. You can call the IRS on that. Absolutely not. I would think no qualified accountant is saying that because that's absolutely not true. Now, if your deductions hit 50% of your income, they start phasing out. So if you make $100,000 and your charitable deductions at $51,000 or $55,000, that last $1,000 or $5,000 starts tapering off. But that first 50, it's all deductible. Best deduction you could have. So you can call the IRS on that. Don't take my word for it. Call the IRS on that.
Okay, so that should be educational for us to inform our congregation, because we have people that's sending out statements saying that you can't write it off.
yeah,
which
no,
is not true.
no. And so not just church, but any
Right,
charitable.
any organization.
So if you give to any 501c3, I should put it that way.
Right.
So a church does not have to be a 501c.
Correct.
But if it's a non-church, it has to be a 501c. So any charitable deduction is it's your best. It's your best. Here and then here, yes. Yeah, you do have to itemize, but everybody can itemize. And so everybody can itemize. I'm doing my mother's taxes. She's 84-year-old, retired. All she has is a small pension, a small Social Security. I'm itemizing her taxes because she has charitable deductions and everything. Anybody can itemize. But you're right, you don't have to itemize. And if you don't itemize, there is something called the standard deduction. And if you don't itemize, I think there is a limit there if you don't itemize. And that's where they might be talking about the $600. But everybody has the right. In fact, unless your income is really, really small, you're almost crazy not to itemize. So anybody, like I said, my 84-year mother, she's itemizing, and she's getting money back. In fact, I shouldn't tell her business on the internet, but she's getting back almost all the taxes she paid out of her pension because she's itemizing, you know. So, yeah. Co-pass, and then I'll come back. I'm trying to get to my last topic that I love the best, yes.
So the itemized is what we need to do, but what happens is that there are still some churches that are not 501c3. And
Churches don't have to be 501c3.
I mean, but they're not reporting or having any paperwork coming back to you saying how much you've given because they're not keeping their records correctly.
Yeah.
And so if they are not keeping their records correctly, they cannot give you an honest letter to say how much you've given. So sometimes I've heard people say things in respect to giving to churches, but if the church is not able to keep a good record of your giving, then there's no recourse for that for you because you don't get a letter back saying how much you've given.
So I'm me. I can't be anybody but me. So I've been audited. So because I've been audited by the IRS, it's a whole nother workshop, but I've been audited by the IRS, so I keep amazingly great records. And so I keep records of everything I give to anybody. And if I give money to a church, Mother Weddle might have seen me do this. I know some others have seen me do it. If I give money to a church and they don't give me an acknowledgement letter, I haze them till they do. I show them on this date, I gave you this amount. You want me to show you the check? I got the check. You're going to give me an acknowledgement letter. And sometimes it takes a while to do it, but I keep my own records. The second thing is acknowledgement letters are important because when you are audited, if you are audited, they will ask you for the letter. A canceled check or a bank statement or a credit card statement is not. They'll look at that, but they want to see the letter. I know from personal experience they will ask for that, so it is important to get it. Sister Belton, did you have your hands up?
Is it best to just like go to an accountant?
Say, I asked your question again. I didn't hear the first part of it.
So every year I'm playing the little cat and mouse game of what is the least. Everyone loves tax year. I hate it because I'm trying to find the least amount of money that I have to give back to them. So if I'm doing that, is it better to just go to an accountant?
Okay,
To see
I'm
if
still
maybe
not
if I'm
sure I
missing-
know what you're asking, so I'm gonna answer what I think you're asking and tell me if I'm answering the wrong thing. So you don't want to owe taxes at the end of the year, right? And so to me, if you don't want to owe taxes at the end of the year, you have to first have your withholdings be the right amount and or pay estimated taxes because I mean, you got to figure that out and either have your withholdings from your paycheck and or pay estimated taxes to not owe at the end of the year. If you do owe at the end of the year and it is above a certain amount, they're going to charge you interest because they basically said you had my money for the year, now you have to pay interest. If you get money back, they don't pay you interest. So there are people who say it's better to owe them as long as you're below that level where you have to pay interest and penalties because you have full use of the money for the year and then you could do whatever with the money for a productive purpose and then write them a small check at the end of the year. I know most of us don't think like that because we want to get our income tax returns back and use it to do whatever we do, you know, buy this, catch up bills or whatever. But the way to do that is managing the withholdings. You know, and I'm maybe TMI, Copass will yell at me later, TMI, I have a pension, I have a nice pension, but the majority of my income is not from my pension. The majority of my income is from other things. I have some businesses, I have some other sources of income, I have rental income, I have real estate. There's no withholdings on any of that. So I pay estimated taxes because if I weren't to do that, I'd have a huge tax bill at the end of the year with huge penalties and interest. So you gotta either have the withholding or, did I answer the question you were asking? Huh? Yeah, it's okay to owe, and if you owe and it's above a certain level, just know you're going to have to pay interest and sometimes penalties because they're basically going to say you had my money for the whole year. So if okay, so let me, yes, I'm trying to, yes.
I want to go back to the church thing because when I know the jurisdiction in our church definitely have the envelope process. So when we put cash in the basket and we just write a note down somewhere that I gave $100, how do we secure that documentation, or is that not going to be?
Yeah, so if you're given cash predominantly and your church does not have a way to record it, it's tough for you to substantiate it. You know, that's why I usually write checks, or if I write cash, I use an envelope to show I write cash. You got to substantiate it. So at the end of the day, you got to substantiate it. If you don't substantiate it, I can tell you from personal experience, if you're audited, then you'll have to give it back. So you got to substantiate it. Let me run through here. So those of you that have businesses, you should be filing a Schedule C. Those of you that have investments, you should be filing a Schedule D. You should be filing a schedule for rental income if you have rental property. And I want to hit estate taxes really quick because if you are a executor of an estate or you are one of your family members have passed away, you still have to file an income tax return for the last year of that person's life. And you also have to file an estate tax return if they have anything considering a sizable estate. So I want to get to end of life plan. I got to get here because this is one of the topics that I really have a passion about, and I told you I have a passion from my personal experience, plus going through the friend. So nobody wants to talk about this. People, they kind of get tensed up, and people think they're going to live forever, and we're people of faith, so you shouldn't talk about death. We're people of faith, but the Bible says it was appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. So everybody should engage in this topic, and everybody should plan for this topic. I found sometimes we do insurance where we plan for the funeral, but we don't think about what happens after the funeral. And it's really, and I started saying this, and I got to be careful how I say it because people get offended, but I started saying it really is selfish. It really is selfish to not do the planning and to leave all the issues and the drama and the garbage pickup for those who are here living behind after you are gone. It's really selfish. I mean, it really, really is. You should do the planning to minimize the garbage pickup and the cleanup that they have to do when you're gone. And to not do that is really, really selfish. And the thing about it is, if you don't do it also, there's always confusion. I don't care how close the family is. I don't care how lovey-dovey you are. Every single funeral, every single death, there's drama in the family. I don't care. I don't care what you say. There's drama every 100%. Somewhere, an auntie, uncle, nephew, cousin, there's drama. So if you plan for it and document your plans, then you minimize that drama and you help those who have to live after you. So everybody should have a will. I don't have time to go through that, but you should have it done by an attorney. Everybody say, by an attorney. By an attorney. They have all these, $40 softwares where you can go and do your own will. That's fine. Still give it to an attorney because they'll help you understand what you need to do in Nebraska. And every will in the state of Nebraska requires a probate process. So what that means is that a judge has to approve what you put in the will. And the process for them doing that is they say, okay, you need to contact everybody that's in the will and everybody that's not in the will that might have a claim on the will, and let them know there's a will, and let them know you're getting ready to go through this process so that if they want to weigh in on the process, they can. Am I telling that right, Mother Gardner? You got to contact everybody, right? You got to go down a long list of people that might have any kind of claim on it. So have your will done by an attorney. I prefer estate plans. That's a whole nother conversation, but estate plans don't go through a probate process. A will is a public document. If you know where to look, you could find anybody's will anywhere if you know where to look. Most people don't know how to do it, but a will is a public legal document. An estate plan is a private document between you and your attorney. Wills have to go through probate, which can last 6, 8, 7, 8, 9 months. Estate plans don't have to do that. So for a will, I'm gonna hit this point, I'm gonna hit 2 points, and then I'm gonna let y'all go. So a will has an executor, all right? That executor has a tough job. Because you know what happens? When a person passes away, if they have an estate, let's say they have a house, they have a car, they have credit cards that still have payments due on them, that person's gone. Those payments don't go away. That mortgage is still due the first of the month. The utility, you got to pay utility, you got to pay the lawnmower, you got to pay the property taxes. You got to pay all of that stuff until the probate process is done, which could be 6, 7, 8, 9 months from now. after they're dead. You got to take care of all of that stuff. So, if you're the executor, if the house ain't paid for, if the car ain't paid for, now if everything's paid for, you can say, well, I'm gonna cut off the utilities, all that stuff. But if it's not paid for, you're the executor. You gotta figure it out. You got to carry it till the probate process is done. So it is a big job. It is a huge job. If someone does the right planning, they could plan for that. An attorney would help you plan for that and put structures to help you plan for that, so you're not putting that pressure on those that have left behind. So everybody needs to do that. It's important to talk with your loved ones about it, have multiple conversations, and help them understand what you want and what the plans are. This is not the time for secrecy. I have this bullet point: somebody must know everything. I'm gonna say that again: somebody must know everything. I did a survey. I'm way over time. Give me about 5 minutes. I'm done. So when I did this the first go round, I did a survey. I asked people how many passwords did they have. Those of y'all that did the survey, don't answer. But those of y'all that weren't here the last time, how many passwords do y'all think y'all have? Yell at the number. 25. 5? Somebody said 5, somebody said 25? 30? I guarantee y'all have 80. I guarantee you have 80. Guarantee it. You got your bank passwords, you got your healthcare passwords, you got your Amazon, your Sam's Club, you got, email, you got PayPal, Facebook. I guarantee you got 80. So, but that's the problem. That is exactly the problem. Unless somebody knows everything, every account, every I'm not saying put it, in the posting so everybody could know it and steal your information, but somebody needs to know everything. After my health journey, I had to get comfortable, and so we picked, obviously co-pastor, but we picked a couple of other people that we're close with, and I had to get comfortable with disclosing everything to them. Sister Carnetta, I had to give them my bank account information. So to be fair, I put it all on a nice sheet, and I put it in my safe. Well, I went over it with them, but I put it in the safe, and I gave them the code to my safe. And Elder Weddles, I monitor to make sure there's somebody needs to know everything. They got to know everything. So if you don't get nothing else, you got to don't get queasy, do end-of-life planning. It's selfish. It is selfish not to do it. And somebody's got to know everything. Somebody's got to know everything. I have one more point I wanted to make. Yes.
Say that this, when we first started, it was so difficult because we're very private. Right, and people assume about us, but we had to literally sit down and lay it out, and we watched people watch our information, and it was amazing. But when you're private, it's really, really hard. You just got to start somewhere and go, because by the time you hit the big stuff, you need to already be comfortable that you're going to have to lay it out. But because our calling and our blessing, and that is in our blessing, we're very private. And we had to tell them stuff, and they were sitting in this shock that we had to just pause and let them work through it to see not as much as about what we have, but how much we do around the world that they didn't know we did. And we had to watch that. That was very difficult for me, because I'm more private. I don't put things on the internet so that when you out of the country, people know my stuff. But I'm very private, and we're very personable, because we also count our blessing as part of our ministry. And we had to watch people watch our stuff. Out of Oates, one time we took him to one of our CPA meetings, and he was just watching us do what we do. And so you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, Because the fact is that had we not done that, there would be, people have lost everything because they didn't know. You lost everything.
Yeah, so you gotta, somebody needs to know everything. So we did a strategy of certain trustees, and we disclosed a bunch of things to them. And I was looking, I got two more quick points, and I'm gonna let you go. I was looking for a place to say this, so I'm gonna say this now. So Friday night at the workers' meeting, Bishop Ford made a comment about a private jet that I had, and I love Bishop Ford. I would have preferred if he wouldn't have said that, but it's his right to say that. And so I wanted to find a place to explain, because people get confused when they hear things like that. And so Elder Weddles, we were going to Superintendent Watson's father's funeral. And Sister Carnetta, what I have is I have a rental car agreement, all right? So Deacon Collins, if you see Deacon Collins driving up in a Mercedes, he probably rented it, okay? All right? Because he don't ride in a Mercedes every day. So I have access to a rental agreement where I can pay by the hour to use it. And so we wanted to be at Superintendent Watson's father's funeral, and the way we can get there and make it work was I paid by the hour for it. So look at somebody and say, Bishop Butler don't have a jet. No more than Deacon Collins has a Mercedes. All right? So, but let me say these two things and then I'm done. Honestly, I'm done. So number one, somebody dies, keep their phone on. This was a huge learning for me. You know why? Because so many things get, you got to get the second code. You know how they do banks and everything else? They send you a code and they send it to your phone. If you cut off the phone, there's no way to do that for the deceased. Keep their cell phone on. If you don't get anything else, two things I want you to get tonight. You got somebody you have to tell everything. I'm not telling you who that is, but somebody needs to know everything, and keep the cell phone on, all right? And the last thing I'm gonna say is really end-of-life taxes. So some of us don't think when somebody's gone, they're gone, but you do have a responsibility to do end-of-life taxes and taxes for their estate. Sure you have a good attorney, ensure you have a good accountant, ensure that things are done decently and in order, because that's the only best way. I was gonna ask, well, I'll ask a question, and then we'll have any final questions, and we'll be gone. So, how many people think $100,000 is a lot of money? I do. Y'all don't? I do. Wow, y'all must be like those Silicon Valley Bank VC. I know y'all wrote President Biden telling him to protect your, all right? How many people think $50,000 is a lot of money? So let me ask it a different way. If I were to give Deacon Corte $500 for you, Sister Gwen, I'm giving Deacon Corte $500 for you because I gotta leave town, and I'm giving him $500, not for him, but for you. And he doesn't give it to you, how you gonna feel? It's only $500, right? But you like, that's my money, right? And at some point, it doesn't make a difference if it's a lot or little. So when you think about estate planning and all of those things, people feel that way about this issue. They feel something about this issue. I mean, they do. Just like $500, it doesn't have to be $50,000, $100,000. It could be something small, and they feel something about it. So you need to be clear and precise and put a plan about your expectations. Make sure people know your plan so there's no confusion. And somebody needs to know everything, all right? I don't care who it is. You decide, you pick. They need to know everything. And for the trustees that we have, I regularly send them emails updating them about stuff I'm doing, because now that I'm comfortable with them knowing certain things, when I do something, I just send an email to them, say, as info, this is what's going on. All right, I'm done. Questions? Was this helpful to anybody? All right, I know y'all got
I
questions.
have a question.
All right, doctor.
And if you have a will,
Yes.
and you put on there what you want to happen
Right.
when you pass away,
Right.
can that be changed by family members?
So if it's a valid will done by an attorney, and that's why you got to have an attorney, right? Because then nobody can have a valid way of attacking it. If it's not done by attorney, Mother Gardner's my witness. We went through this relatively recently. The probate process contacts every person that could possibly have any kind of claim on it, and gives them the opportunity to make a claim on that claim, even if they're not included in the will. So if it was done by an attorney and you were in sound mind and all that, and it could be proved you were not under undue influence, you did it, you signed it, you were in your right mind, nobody made you do it, then they really don't have a case. But if you don't have something like that, you have something scribbly in writing and don't know when it was done, or somebody had a gun to your head, anybody who has a claim on it can. Mother Guard, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but how many people are on that list? Like 15, 20 people? 30 people were on the list that had a potential claim, and any of them could file that potential claim. So you got to have an attorney to do it the right way. Yes, Mother.
Potential people can,
You legally have to contact them. The probate that's what I'm trying to get y'all to understand. The probate process is you legally have, the judge, the attorney makes you send a certified letter to them saying there is a will here, and if they want to get in the process to see if they have a claim, they have a period of time to do that. You have to contact them.
but if they're your immediate family, isn't that enough?
Mother Gardner, there was like 30 people on the list.
But where these people come from?
So you have siblings. You might, if you have any remaining living parents, you have spouses, you have children, you have, the connections there. So his family, her family, our family. Let me get Sister Belton, then Mother Donetta. Yes. So the will probably had a lot more in it than that, right? All right, and you're saying guardian, not executor, right? Okay, so not knowing anything more than what you just said, I would, again, one of my principles is communication, communication, communication. Have discussions with your mother or whoever, and really clarify the expectations of what that means now. And if possible, even put that expectations, because just being a guardian could mean a lot of different things. And is the expectation that they're going to live with you until they are a certain age, 18? Is the expectation you're just covering all of their living responsibilities, or will there be some funds given to you to cover their living responsibilities? So I don't know how old they are, but do they know it? Okay, because in some places, depending on how old the children are, they might be able to petition in the process to say, no, I don't want to do this. I want to do this instead of that. So I don't know how old they are. Obviously, if a child's very small, they can't do that. If a child is a teenager, they might have the ability to do that in some places. So communication, see, thank you for that question, right? Because you said they sent it a while ago, and wills are like mysterious things, and we don't want to bring it up because it's like we're talking about that. No, talk about it. What do you want? What does this mean? What is the intention? Talk about it. Talk about it and then put it in writing. All right? Yes, Mother Danetta, great question. Yes.
I want to say that. My husband I have now, he has a wife, had a wife that's deceased. She signed all her part to him. So now would the kids be able to come to get the property they have if she signed her part to him?
Yeah, I don't know what it means by she signed all her stuff to him. I don't know what that means.
Like a will, she willed her stuff to him.
Is she passed or she's still
She
alive?
passed, and then she got 2 children though.
So,
Can they come in?
so I don't
like
know
that?
what state.
You don't know that?
I don't know what state they're in, or yeah. So I don't know. Obviously, I don't know the laws of the state of Indiana. But if he now owns it and he has biological children, okay. So I do not know the laws of Louisiana, but I come back to what I said before. It's okay to talk about these things. Get an attorney involved. It doesn't have to be a scary secret thing. I think that's it. No, talk about it. Have an attorney look at it and say, does this do what we want it to do or not? If this does not do what we want to do, how do we change it to make it do what we want to do? I mean, talk about it, and everybody should know. Somebody should know everything. All right, any other questions? Yes, Elder Oates.
We had a question online that's
Okay.
asking, do you have a good reference to contact about estate planning?
Are they in this state?
They're in Nebraska.
So in Nebraska, we have a couple of really good law firms in Nebraska. We use McGrath North. They're a law firm downtown in the big First National Bank Tower. We use them. The reason why I use them, not only do they do a good job and they have expertise, and they have a whole group that just does estate planning. They have an expertise in it. But the first estate plan we did, we used an individual person. And I realized that if you use an individual person, if something happens to that person, that knowledge is gone. Because we use a corporation or a law firm, that knowledge is resident in the law firm. And we had one estate planning attorney, Jeff Petrogelli. He retired during the pandemic. I guess he didn't want to get sick. And so now we have another one in the same firm, but they have all of our records. They have all of the sequence of the things, because we've changed ours, Sister Belton, we've changed ours probably every 2 or 3 years. As things happen and we talk about changes we want, we change ours every 2 years or so. Every 2 or 3 years, we go to him and change it. But it's resident in a law firm. So we use McGrath North. Our attorney is a young man named Jonathan Grob. We like him. They also charge $250 an hour. You may not want to pay that, but I think it's worth it. So, all right, we're done. Oh, yes, co-pastor, yes.
I was just saying about the people who don't want to notify people, they can come back at you after you think it's all over. So it's better to tell them ahead of time than have somebody's child who they got out the wedlock come back later and sue you for what they feel they're due or to cause confusion. The process already takes almost a year. You don't want anybody, so as soon as they make a claim, it puts a pause on the process, and it might be 2 years before you get it settled. And remember, for those 2 years, you're paying taxes, you're paying the bills, and so while you're waiting for all that to get settled, so it's better to just go and bite the bullet, as they say, and tell the people, because now in the day of intelligence, they can look up anybody's online and say, oh, so-and-so died.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna let y'all go. I don't think there's gonna let y'all go. So when my father passed in 2011, I purchased my parents' home. And Mother Hunt, as part of the arrangement to purchase my parents' home, I put in the deed, I put an arrangement as part of the purchase price and in the deed of the home that she has a right to live there the rest of her life for free. So I own the home, but she has the right to live there. That right succeeds. I could die tomorrow, co-pastor could die. That right still exists. It's an inviolable right. You can't remove it. So I made it clear to the trustees, at one point in time, to our children, to everybody else, to anybody who think they might have a claim on that home, because it's a very nice home. It's a very growing in value. I've made it clear to everybody and anybody that whether we're here or not, as long as she lives there for free, all right? And so that's what I mean by being really clear and precise so there is no confusion with anybody, not only communicating what your intent is, but make sure in the documents follow that intent. And then that kind of eliminates all issues. Yes. Yeah, so I know military people, or from my familiarity with some military relatives, they make you do that, particularly before you deploy. They make you do that. Um, I don't know if you know my niece and my nephew. They're colonels in the Air Force. Christian Williams and Jeray Williams, so they're colonels in the Air Force. They've been deployed in many places, and they've had those things. But I did this conversation with them, and they came back and they did a full estate plan deal on top of that thing that they did for the military, and they're so glad they did it. So this doesn't prevent you from doing that, but there are some things you really need to kind of clarify and be precise, and you could only put that. I prefer estate plans documents, but if all you want to do is a will, do a will, but get an attorney to help you it, because they could help you draw out, okay, what do you really want to happen? Start there. What, if you're not here, what do you want to happen? And then go from there and make sure that's in the document, and then make sure you communicate. This is what I want to happen, and here's in the document. So I'm gonna say this, and I'm done. All right. My wife's gonna tell me TMI. So in our document, when we're both gone, not, if I'm gone and she's here, that's something different. But when we're both gone, our instructions are to liquidate everything we have. Nobody's going to get my house. Nobody's going to liquidate everything I have and then disperse it according to our plans. So that is a clear part of our document. So you don't have to fight over, well, they could fight over my guns. They could fight over that. Some people are already making claims on my swords, and you can fight over my suits, my collar, my bishop's collar. You can fight over that, Elder Oates. But the other stuff, no. Sell it and then disperse it. according to our plans. So whatever y'all want to do, just be clear. Just be clear about it. All right, yeah, and communicate. Be clear, make sure the document looks that way, and you communicate. Yes, Mother Reynolds. Yeah, so I feel you. We have something similar. It's not exactly like that, but we have something similar. I get where you're coming from. I get where you're coming from. All right. Anybody else? I went way over time. Yes, co-pastor.
Since you put it out there, we also, before we did that, we asked the children, do you want this house? Do you want this property? Do you want this? We gave them an opportunity to say it. So we didn't just cut them off. Amen. But we decided that it wasn't worth any other fight. Since everybody's saying, because our children all have their own stuff, there's no need to have a fight. So we didn't just blanket it out there and do it that way, but it was in our heart before we asked them that we were going to do it, but we gave them opportunity. But the thing that when they say it, thing that I think Bishop is saying so clearly, don't tell me you told so-and-so. Don't tell me you told 3 so-and-sos. Nothing matters if it's not in writing. And I just want to say that because Bishop recommends you go to an attorney. All the attorneys aren't $250 an hour. Go to an attorney. They know the laws. They can help you. You do not know everything. And you can say he ain't getting if he want. We even went to if they got married, and if they got married and their husband or wife had children before them. We went all the way down into their business.
We did do that. So we have things in our plan that says what step children can get, what they can't get versus biological. So we have that detail in our plan. And we've changed it over time, we've evolved it, but we have that kind of level of detail. So our plan would take care, Mother Danetta, of the thing you said, because we put in it, in-laws, steps, biological, we put all of that in our plan. It's explicitly written there. All right. Yes. Look, I want to say this. I got to let y'all go. We're way over time. So let me say, don't forget your point, Sister Deanne. So her talking about our children reminded me, initially, we had our children kind of as executors, but we did have a conversation, and we've concluded over time, our children are not managing this when we're gone. We have other people that are managing it. And a couple of them said they don't want to have to deal with the pressure and the emotion of dealing with this. And so we have a whole set of other people that are managing this for us. It's not our children. Now they do get some money out of it. Not all the money, they do get some money out of it, but we have other people that are managing it. All right, yes, Sister Deanne.
So I am a single mom and all my kids are grown now, but I do own a home and other things. And so when I was thinking about this, I was thinking to myself, what do I do with the home? And so I was thinking, was it selfish? Like, what if one person is homeless and they have no place to stay? But after listening to this, I'm selling it too, and y'all can take the money. I didn't know that. I thought that maybe I wasn't really thinking about it like that, because I'm like, oh man, poor so-and-so if they don't have a place to stay. But no, this looks like that's the thing.
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's easier to liquidate and disperse the funds and to argue who gets this, who gets that. It's just easier to do that. Whoever you have as a trustee, you could write in there, and we do actually have some language in our plan that does this, that says the trustee, because we're gone, we're dead, I don't care, I'm gone, but the trustees do have a right to take in consideration the sale of, so my mother's home, she lives there till, she lives there the rest of her life for free. I have another home, a whole nother situation that I have some relatives living in. The trustees have the discretion, to decide to liquidate that right away or to wait a little while and give them a place, an opportunity to find someplace else to live. So the trustees have that discretion. I didn't tell them you have to sell it right away. You do have to sell it, but you don't have to sell it like the day after I die, but you do have to sell it. Yeah.
It's clear, is that we also put in that the trustees get some money for doing this because we have covered more than once and it had to come out of our pocket for somebody else dying. So we were trying to be nice and take care and help people. And when it's family, it's real tough. So when my father passed, everybody wanted to come and gather around because they thought there was a policy. And I knew it was a policy because my father and I had extensive conversations. And then people started barking at me. And I said, you are welcome to make that decision. They were standing behind me. I said, if you write the check. I said, but since I'm writing the check, this is what I'm doing because this is what my father and I decided. So it's enough to drive families apart. But we had an extensive conversation, and the fact is that the person in charge usually has to pay something. I never got my money back, but that wasn't my point. My point was that people just all decided to join me in the meeting. And I'm like, they saying, oh, we're going to have this. Oh, no, unless you're going to write that check. That's not happening.
So, again, remember, you got to tell somebody everything. You got to have it in writing, communicate it. And to not do this is really, really selfish, all right? It's really, really selfish. All right. I'm done. I don't want to cut off any questions, but we're way over time. All right. Again, was this helpful to anybody? All right. Come on, let's stand to our feet. We're going home. Elder Oates, would you dismiss us in prayer? We don't receive an offering on Sunday night, but you know, if you wanted to leave an offering, we'll take it, but.
Let's look away to heaven. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything that we heard on tonight, God. We thank you, God, for preparing, God, in the name of Jesus, because we all know that we have an appointed time, Lord, and we thank you, God, for all the things that we've heard, God. Let us apply them, Lord, in the name of Jesus. Let us not just leave here as hearers, God, but as doers also, in the name of Jesus. God, as we leave this place, but never from your presence, Lord, protect us and keep us, God, even through this whole week, Lord, as we are going to our various destinations, God, traveling on the highways and on the byways. Lord, keep us safe, keep us protected, Lord, in the name of Jesus. And let us return at the appointed time. And God, we give you all the glory, the honor, and the praise. In Jesus' name we